Welcome back. So now we're going to talk a little bit about this peasant entrepreneurship and how it started, and then kind of what it looks like before the international balloon operators come. Now they mention on page 932 of the article that the village that we're talking about in this article, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it, Gurima, is 200 kilometers southeast of Ankara in the Cappadocia region. And in the mid-1980s, there was an open-air museum, which was a cave Byzantine monastic site, was given UNESCO World Heritage and National Park status. And this village is within the national park boundaries. Now the village only has about 2,000 individuals, 2,000 people in it. But because it was within the boundaries of this national park and it had this World Heritage status, there was not a possibility to develop large-scale kind of tourism infrastructure because of the fact that things kind of had to remain traditional. So that meant that people kind of had to maintain doing things exactly the way they always had. And you compare that to somewhere like, I don't know, I mean, from what I've read, like Iceland, for example, used to be very, idyllic and rural and everything until, people all started wanting to go see some of the scenes and things like that. And the country of Iceland has developed infrastructure to accommodate tourists, right? Here, they cannot develop that infrastructure to accommodate tourists. So they're still going to be very much tied to their traditional peasant ways of doing. And they give an interesting quote on page 932 to 933, and they say that most households continue to own gardens and small fields which are worked mostly by women with the use of mainly simple technology and through a variety of labor exchange networks. Production in these gardens is mainly for home consumption, and any surplus is sold at the market, the profit going towards the purchase of basic household goods and the payment of taxes. Concurrently, Gurima today is inextricably linked to national and global processes, both social and economic. Through tourism and migration, the men of Gurima have become entrepreneurs and wage laborers, even if their households continue their subsistence farming activities. And that's where we start talking about the male versus female roles in these Turkish families. So the women still kind of engage in traditional peasant labor, whereas the men are actually going out and they're becoming familiar with international practices, and they're the ones becoming entrepreneurs. Men are the entrepreneurs, the women are not, which I think is an interesting continuity. And I like the way Hazel says this on page 933. She says, I attributed the continuity of peasant attributes to women, whereas I portrayed the men together with tourism entrepreneurship as representing change. So it's the men that represent the force of change, not the women. Now I'm not saying this is universal or anything, we're just talking about this particular context in this paper. So who winds up becoming the first customers, or what kind of helps launch this entrepreneurship? So during the 1980s, you have a lot of backpackers, and my friends in America, you're probably not as familiar with this whole backpacking idea, but a lot of Europeans in particular love this. They put all their clothes and everything in a backpack, and they stay in hostels or bread and breakfast. They try to see as much as they can on a low budget. That's what these backpackers are. So these backpackers are coming to Gurima to see the national park, to see the monastic site, all this good stuff, and they need somewhere to stay, but backpackers don't want to spend a lot of money on a hotel. So there's a need that arises for these pensions, or pension, but not pension in English sense, pension as in a bed and breakfast. Okay, so these bed and breakfasts start up to accommodate these backpackers. Now this is what gets kind of interesting. The original entrepreneurs that started hosting these backpackers, they were ridiculed, right? People, you're stupid. You're operating a hotel out of your home. They thought it was ridiculous. But then when they saw how much money their neighbors were making by taking in backpackers, all the other people in the village start opening up their homes to backpackers too, so that everybody can make a similar amount of money. That's what I talked about in the last video. It's this continuous struggle to remain equal. Okay? So that's one of the problems with innovation in this village of Gurima, is because tourism is so visible, it becomes very obvious what your neighbors are doing, so you can just copy your neighbors very quickly, right? So, everybody wants to keep up with the Joneses. Okay? Then something else happens in the 1990s. You start having these tour agency owners. And tour agency owners offer services to tourists, and if members or owners of one of these bed and breakfasts or pensions can refer the backpackers or their guests over to one of these tour agencies, they can get a commission. Well, you also have to remember at this time, the pensions everyone's competing with each other, and it gets so bad that people will lower the price of having guests stay with them to the point that they can't make a profit, even offering stays for free just so their neighbor doesn't get a guest. So they're willing to take a financial loss just to make sure that their neighbor doesn't get anything, right? And of course they're also hoping that while someone stays as a backpacker in their hotel, maybe they can sell a commission and at least make something. And so they actually wind up having a cooperative to keep people from undercharging, right? So the pension owners that belong to this cooperative agree that under no circumstances will they lower the price of a stay at their bed and breakfast below a certain rate. Of course, this also gives the pension owners a degree of negotiating power, because if a backpacker wants to negotiate the price of the stay and get a little bit lower, they can at least say, no, here's this floor, I cannot charge any less than that. And you can know that none of your neighbors will charge any less than that either. So that gives you a little bit of security. But this is the complete opposite of these kind of cooperatives that you see in other countries. In other countries, the tourism cooperatives are designed to make sure that you don't cheat tourists, like you don't overcharge tourists for certain services. This is to make sure that you don't undercharge and get ripped off by tourists because you're so worried about your neighbor having more than you. That's crazy, isn't it? So again, this is the whole idea of limited good that I mentioned in the previous video. Again, a lot of that is just driven by jealousy. I will take a loss to make sure that my neighbor doesn't have anything. So then what you start seeing is more portfolio entrepreneurship. So some of the Airbnb owners or bed and breakfast owners also start getting shares in other kinds of activities, which they call portfolio entrepreneurship. So they say many pension owners start up or took part-time ownership of a tour agency, and so that they could actually make profits instead of just getting commissions from working with tourism agencies. They talk about carpet shop owners making partnerships with different bed and breakfast owners, so that you could refer, hey, if you go buy a carpet down the street here, they'll give you a discount. Meanwhile, I'm going to get a commission on this. This is what we call portfolio entrepreneurship. Now, if you've been watching my videos on the rock climbers, this is also known as multi-layered labor, right? So the operation of a bed and breakfast helps you get commissions from carpet owners, and it helps you maybe with your business as a tourism operator. So they talk about the peasant mode is multifunctional while the entrepreneurial mode is more specialized. Through multi-ownership, Gurum entrepreneurs might be said to be re-peasantizing their entrepreneurial practice. I don't know that there's any literature that says that entrepreneurs are more specialized than peasant entrepreneurs. I mean, there's lots of entrepreneurs all over the world that have a portfolio of businesses. So I was a little bit confused by that statement. Now there's something else that happens, and she's kind of foreshadowing before she talks about the balloon operators, is that even though a lot of these entrepreneurs in this Turkish village really don't like each other and they don't trust each other, and they kind of have this inherent tendency to do everything in their power to make sure their neighbor doesn't get a little bit more than they have, there's still a degree of social capital. They still would rather work together with each other than they would support an outsider, like a foreigner, like a global tourism operator. And that's where we start talking about the balloon operators, which I'm going to talk about in the next video. One other interesting note that Hazel Tucker makes in this article is that entrepreneurship in this particular village had very low barriers to entry. Most of the entrepreneurs didn't have to sell their land in order to become bed and breakfast owners. They were able to still maintain their land, still maintain their traditional lifestyle, while they're just kind of opening up an extra room in their house for guests, which I thought was quite interesting. So in the next video, we are going to start talking about what happens when a bunch of international balloon operators come onto the scene. Hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you give me a thumbs up, that's a like, subscribe, and comment down below. I'll see you then.